one of the most famous, historical, informative, and interesting plantations in the United States. I'm the NYC Traveler, and we're at Monticello in Virginia. Outside of Charlottesville, Virginia, the drive up to the visitor center gives a very small idea of the original 5,000 acres that young Thomas Jefferson inherited from his father in 1757 when he was 13 and the land was divided between him and his younger brother Randolph. They were the only surviving sons of 10 children, 8 of whom survived to adulthood. The daughters got a little of the estate as well. Jefferson was born at Shadwell along the Rivanna River. Along the property, he inherited less than 20 enslaved people. The house at Shadwell burned down. A smaller one was built for his mother, and the now grown-up Thomas moved to Monticello by 1768 after attending school and reading for the law. He began planning and building a house, marrying Martha Wales Skelton in 1772. With her dowry came more property, Elk Hill, and, more significantly, more labor in the form of enslaved people. However, Jefferson was delayed in building his dream home at this property by a little thing called the American Revolution. In between helping to found the United States, writing the Declaration of Independence, serving as minister to France, Secretary of State, Vice President, and later President of the United States, the house was not mostly completed until 1809, when he left office as president. Meanwhile, his wife Martha died in 1782, and only 2 of his 6 children with her survived to adulthood. The younger one, Mary, also called Polly or Maria, died at age 25, but not before marrying and having 3 children, one of whom survived to adulthood. The elder daughter, also named Martha, but called Patsy, was Jefferson's hostess of Monticello and the White House, and she managed to have 12 children, with 11 surviving to adulthood. Like most large plantations in America during the years before the Civil War, it was worked primarily by enslaved African American labor, although some free labor helped to build the present mansion. And like most plantations, it has a complicated history. But for this chapter, we're going to focus on how the house was built. Try to get to the plantation before your ticket time for the house tour. This way, you can explore the Visitor Center Museum. The exhibit focuses on the architecture. Meanwhile, we've been looking at the relief map. All history aside, Monticello has architectural significance. While at William and Mary College in Williamsburg, Thomas studied math, metaphysics, and philosophy. After graduation, he read for the law, which means he basically read, studied, and interned while working as a law clerk. There weren't many tests for the bar back then. During these years, and for the rest of his life, Jefferson continued to read and study many other subjects. He loved books and collected them, eventually having at least 3 libraries. The first one was destroyed in the fire at Shadwell. The second one was sold to the United States government after the British burned Washington, D.C. during the War of 1812. And the last one was the collection that he gathered after that. The total amount of volumes that he owned throughout his lifetime was about 8,700. Surely, amongst these books were those of architecture. He made Monticello an ever-evolving project. When he started the first house in 1768, he lived mostly in the South Pavilion. Martha, his wife, would spend a lot of time at Elk Hill. After she died in 1782, and after Jefferson spent time in Paris as minister to France, he returned in 1789 with plans for remodeling Monticello. He used inspirations from neoclassical, late 18th century European houses and villas, but a lot of the plans were from his own designs. After his return from Europe and during his presidency, he did a lot. He added a center hallway, a set of rooms to the house, and changed the second floor to be a mezzanine bedroom floor. The first floor entryway became a sort of museum with exhibits and everything. The first floor of the house flows like many houses of the later Gilded Age, perhaps being an example, moving from the sitting room to the library to Jefferson's room to the parlor to the dining room and to another bedroom. It made sense now to have some bedrooms on the first floor, as it would be helpful when someone got older and had difficulty maneuvering the stairs. Jefferson thought that grand staircases were a waste of space, so he had narrow staircases toward the rear of the house so that the other rooms could be opened up. However, one of the most notable aspects of the house is also one of the most famous, the rotunda or the dome, up on the third floor. There is a small apartment inside the rotunda, but it was rarely used. Speculation is that it might have been too hot in the summer months or too cold in the winter months. Speaking of climate, Jefferson allowed for an air cooling system by aligning the windows so that air could flow from one room to the other. The outer buildings are another innovation. Most plantations of this era had the work areas and living quarters for the enslaved persons at some distance from the house. But Jefferson designed a plan for this area to be close to the house as possible without being obvious to visitors at first. Since the mansion is set up on a hill, the kitchens, dairies, smokehouses, and other rooms are built into the hill, accessible from a walkway, from a hallway, from the cellars, which in turn are accessible from a staircase in the house. The kitchens, dairies, smokehouses, etc. had doors that led to the outside. Since a kitchen fire was a concern back in those days, that danger was minimized with those rooms being set and built almost into the ground. That wing was still a separate building, but linked with a covered hallway, which looked like a small, long building. Similarly, Mulberry Row, which housed the stables, blacksmith, living quarters, they were close by as well. The fields and gardens were behind them rather than the other way around. This kept the population nearby and changed the layout of the farm, making it a small village. And this made sense, since most large plantations tried to be as self-sufficient as possible. However, as we would later see, this system also would contribute to the large amount of debt that most large plantations had, trying to be self-sufficient, despite the free labor from enslaved persons. Jefferson kept meticulous notes and plans and drawings and everything else. As you can see from all of the documents and all of the artifacts in this exhibit, this would be extremely useful in subsequent years when the estate would be restored and repaired by future owners. For example, there are plans of the rotunda and the roofing system, very detailed, including earlier drafts, with so much information that they would be consulted and used when the roofing system was repaired. Seeing the original information and the materials as they were stripped made decisions like what modern materials to use and what building methods to use a lot easier. Like most grand houses, the differences in the details, even the great designs of today, in houses, hotels, office buildings, etc., do not have the minuteness built into the physical structure of the edifice. If it seems to be so, then it is likely a facade that can be easily taken down or replaced. Jefferson himself actually used some of that theory in his design, which would be a great example of the great houses built in about 70 years when the Gilded Age would be upon us. Equally valuable are the excavated artifacts and examples of the tools of that era, like other museums would display. Most people usually breeze by exhibits of this type, but if you take the time to even scan them briefly, you will have a better understanding when you tour the mansion and other buildings themselves. I'm the NYC Traveler, and we've been planning to build Monticello.